She stood on the beach in her grandmother's white summer dress, facing the family who'd emptied her bank account and thrown her out. Moments earlier, they'd been smiling for cameras. Now the crowd was silent as a lawyer read out her name as the legal co-owner of the property they'd just claimed as their own. It's a true story of betrayal timing and one perfectly played move. What would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts below, I'd love to hear them. I didn't know that the only thing I'd bring back from Boston this summer was a letter and a war. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windshield as I turned onto our street, that familiar tang of ocean salt mixing with cut grass. The Cooper house looked exactly the same as when I'd left for school. Crisp white siding navy shutters, a porch swing that hardly ever swung. Inside, the air was cool, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner, but there was a stiffness to it, like the walls had been waiting to judge me. Granny's last words looped in my head the way a song gets stuck. Don't let anyone take this from you. I didn't know yet what this was supposed to mean, but the heavy envelope in my bag felt like a piece of the answer. I carried it upstairs before anyone noticed, sitting cross-legged on my bed as I slid my finger under the seal. Her handwriting filled the page in looping blue ink, steady even at the end. She wrote about believing in me, about knowing I valued things for more than their price tags. And then the part that made my breath catch, she'd left me $850,000 transferred into an account in my name and a reference to a deed for our special place. I had to read it twice before it settled. This was more than money. It was her faith, her final gift. For a moment, I was back on her porch, a glass of iced tea sweating on the table between us, her voice explaining how property could be both shelter and leverage. I was 16 then, doodling building facades in the margins of her lesson, but I'd listened. She'd always made me feel like my future was something worth investing in. By the time I came down for dinner, the envelope was tucked safely in my bag. I slid into my usual seat across from Kyle. He didn't look up, thumb scrolling over his phone. My parents smiled in that polite, brittle way people do when there's company, except there wasn't. The smell of roasted chicken filled the space between us. I heard from Granny's lawyer today. I began my voice casual. She left me something. Enough to finish school, maybe start my own architecture studio. Brian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Linda's smile didn't move, but her eyes flicked toward him for the briefest second, a signal passing in silence. Kyle set his phone down just long enough to smirk. That's nice, my mother said finally, her tone airy, almost dismissive. We'll have to talk about it later. I tried to ignore the prickle in my gut filling my plate while Brian launched into a story about a client's vacation home. The conversation moved on, but I could still feel that loaded glance across the table, like they were speaking in a language I wasn't meant to understand. After dinner, I carried my bag upstairs, but paused on the landing. Kyle's voice drifted from the living room below, low and urgent. Margin call. Yeah, I know, I'll get it covered. A beat of silence. Then my father's voice joined in, quieter, the words indistinct. I shut my door, leaning back against it, the weight of the envelope pressing into my side. Outside, the wind off the bay rattled the porch swing chains. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but their voices carried easily through the vents. Better off in the family fund. By breakfast, my bank account was as empty as the trust I had in them. Sun pushed a white bar of light across my bedroom floor as I thumbed open the banking app. The number blinked up at me, a clean, merciless 0. I refreshed. 0 again. The transaction history loaded with neat little lines until one swallowed the rest transfer out authorized signer Brian Cooper. A knot rose under my ribs. The account was still the joint one set up when I was a minor. I'd meant to split it when I turned 18, then 19, then 21, but I trusted inertia. Trusted family. Joint means either party can empty it. Legal, technical, bloodless. A loophole you don't see until it snaps. The hallway smelled like coffee and toast. My mother hummed somewhere. My father's low voice floated from the kitchen. I walked in, barefoot, phone and handscreen bright with the void. Where is it? Brian didn't flinch. He set his mug down with the patience of a surgeon. In the family fund. My throat scraped. You took it. We reallocated it. He said, almost conversational. Linda slid a plate toward me like that made it polite. It's in the family fund. We'll use it better than you would. I laughed one sharp breath that hurt my teeth. It was mine. Money is stewardship, my mother said, like reciting a proverb. You're young. This way it helps all of us. All of us meant Kyle, too. He sauntered in hair-perfect phone in hand like an accessory eyes skimming my face for the reaction he wanted. Relax, Mads. Dad knows what he's doing. Authorized signer, I said, turning the screen so they could see the record. You knew exactly what you were doing. Don't be dramatic, Linda said, too bright. We'll talk tonight when everyone's calm. I carried the app with me all day like a wound, checking the number as if my glare could pull digits back through the wire. I called the bank. A calm voice confirmed what I already knew. Joint account holders have independent authority to withdraw funds. If I had questions, I could visit a branch and file a complaint. Against who? The man whose name sits 3 lines above mine on the deed to this house. By dinner, the sky had burned down to copper. The table gleamed. I ate nothing. Brian outlined our vision words like growth, security, legacy, dropping into the silence with the heft of stones. I told them what the money was meant for tuition studio ran a life I could build myself. My mother folded her napkin eyes soft with a pity I didn't want. If you can't support our decision, you need to find somewhere else to stay this summer. The sentence landed and kept landing. Something in me went still, a lake freezing smooth in an instant. I looked at Kyle. He leaned back delighted as if watching a final point in a game he'd already won. I stood chair legs scraping wood. My hands didn't shake. I cleaned my plate, stacked it with ritual care, and carried it to the sink. Upstairs, I packed like I was inventorying a life sketchbook's pencils, laptop the letter. I unplugged chargers with quiet clicks, folded clothes into a suitcase I hadn't planned to open again so soon. The house murmured below me, the television, the news, my parents pretending they hadn't just redrawn the map. When I came down with the first bag, Kyle lounged in the hallway, one foot propped against the baseboard. As she passes him in the hallway, Kyle mutters, "Good luck out there, little sister. I thought I'd lost everything until I unlocked the cottage and found her smile waiting for me." June light had turned honey thick by the time I reached the cedar cottage. The shingles were silvered with salt. The porch steps soft with age, and when I fit the spare key into the stubborn lock, I could almost feel her hand guiding mine. Inside, the place breathed pine, and sea floorboards creaked like they were greeting an old story. I set my salvaged bags beside the narrow bed and stood still, letting the quiet hold me until my shoulders dropped. This was mine. Ours. I unpacked slowly, giving each familiar object a small ceremony. Sketchbooks on the desk by the window pencils and the blue mug she'd bought at the craft fair, the letter in the top drawer as if drawers could keep promises. A gull cried. The bay shifted its weight against the shore. In my head, Granny's voice from years ago. One day you'll need this place more than ever. I hadn't understood then. I did now. A knock rattled the screen door. A woman with silver hair and mischievous eyes smiled back at me, a foil pan cradled in a check towel. "Evelyn Carter," she said. "Your grandmother's partner in crime for neighborhood gossip. I brought muffins before you remembered to eat sadness instead. They were still warm." We sat at the little table while she asked after Boston, and I offered safe answers. Her gaze kept circling the cottage the way you admire a friend's face after a long absence. "She bragged on you," Evelyn said. "You two had a project you were proud of. Said you'd make something here that mattered." Her smile tilted. The Coopers didn't always understand mattering. "What project?" The question came out bare. "Best ask her files," she said, tapping the hallway. "Your grandma hid her treasures in plain sight." After she left, I followed the scent of cedar to the hall closet. Behind quilts and a tackle box sat an old steamer trunk with tarnished latches. The lid side open to folders tied in twine. Deeds, clipped articles, receipts annotated in her neat hand. And then a manila file that made my fingertips go cold. Tenancy in common Madeline Cooper listed alongside Margaret Hale for a seaside lot I knew by heart. At the bottom, a registry stamp, Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, 221 45823. A restrictive covenant in plain English, no sale, no lease, no encumbrance without signatures from all owners. My breath gathered. I snapped photos, then scanned the pages with my phone, aligning corners like they were precious photographs. I called Samuel Blake. He answered on the second ring voice, even the metronome I needed. I explained, sent the files paced while the bay kept breathing. Paper rustled on his end. Silence lengthened, tightened, and then something in his tone lifted like a door opening. If this is recorded like it says, you've just found your ace. I pressed my palm to the cool window pane, the cottage wrapped around me like a shield, the ocean opening out as if it had been holding its breath. Maddie looks out the window at the sea, thinking, they have no idea what's coming. If I played this card at the right moment, they wouldn't see it coming until the floor disappeared beneath them. Fog pressed against the windows of Samuel's office, turning the harbor into a smudge. The clock on his bookshelf ticked like a metronome for my breath. Old paper and coffee steadying smells. When he set the printout on the desk between us, my grandmother's name and mine sat side by side in stark black type. Barnstable County Registry, he said, tapping the stamp. Tenancy and Common Registry number 2021-45823. Restrictive covenant, no sale, lease, mortgage, or encumbrance without all owners' signatures. He looked up. They can parade all they want, but they can't move an inch without you. Granny's sly smile flickered through my head the day she pressed the cottage key into my palm, amused and secret like she'd already plotted this morning for me. Anger settled into a narrower line. Precision. So what's the play sequence matters, Samuel said. He numbered the steps on a legal pad. 1, we choose a public moment, some event where their narrative depends on spectacle. 2, we serve a notice of ownership in person in front of witnesses. 3, we let the coverage work as a deterrent. No shouting, no scenes, just record and disclose. He flipped to another page. I'll also prepare a lis pendens notice of pending action. If they try to rush paperwork, the filing clouds title and warns any bank or buyer there's a dispute. Evelyn arrived with a gust of fog, shaking droplets from her scarf. They love an audience, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Linda measures worth in how many people clap. We'll need proof of what they've claimed, Samuel said. That part's easy. Evelyn pulled her phone. They can't resist posting. Screenshots with timestamps, downloads of videos, even the file metadata. I'll show you how to save it all clean. She glanced at me softer, and I might pass a quiet note to a reporter who covers town events. She's fair. Doesn't twist things, just lets the camera roll. Discreet, Samuel said. No leaks about our documents. We control the moment, not the rumor. I spent the next hour collecting digital footprints, Linda's captions about legacy, Brian's humble brag threads, Kyle's boomerangs from the construction site. I saved invitations, RSVP lists, press teasers, anything that treated the property as if it already belonged to them. My phone buzzed with a new notification from Kyle's public account. I opened it, pulse snagging. An animated invitation unfurled: Seaview Villas grand opening August 12th. Press, local officials, donors, champagne icons bobbed in the margins. I turned the screen toward Samuel. He read it once, then again, something like satisfaction tightening at the corners of his mouth. He leaned back, eyes glinting. Good. The bigger the audience, the harder the fall. The day they chose to crown themselves was the day I planned to take away the throne. By noon, the beach had turned into a showroom. White chairs faced a portable stage draped in navy champagne, sweating in buckets beside a Cooper Legacy Project banners that snapped in the salt wind. Gulls looped restless as if they could smell the change coming. I smoothed the skirt of Granny's white summer dress and felt the cottage key cool against my palm. Calm but coiled. I could hear the tide arguing softly with the sand. Brian took the mic, first voice rich with practiced humility. He painted a future in broad, shining strokes: family vision, stewardship, legacy, while Linda smiled at donors with the careful warmth of someone rehearsed by mirrors. Kyle stood center stage with oversized scissors basking in a light he hadn't earned. The ribbon glittered like a promise about to break. Samuel appeared at my shoulder, briefcase in hand, expression steady as the foghorn beyond the harbor. On your mark, he murmured. I nodded and stepped into the aisle. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. The white dress parted the sea of guests as cleanly as a keel. Brian saw me and faltered. Linda's smile froze, then rebooted into something brittle. Kyle lifted the scissors higher as if height could ward off gravity. I walked all the way to the front row and stopped. The microphone was still warm from Brian's speech when Samuel lifted it, his voice crisp. Under Massachusetts law and per this recorded deed, Madeline Cooper is the legal co-owner of this property. He held up the certified copy seal flashing in the sun. Per registry record number 2021 45823, and pursuant to a restrictive covenant enforceable by law, no sale, lease, mortgage, or encumbrance is valid without the signatures of all owners. A hush fell so suddenly I could hear the flag snap. In the press pen, Clara Jennings adjusted her camera and zoomed. Her lens found Brian's smile as it collapsed into calculation. Donors leaned toward one another, whispers picking up like wind across dune grass. Due diligence liability, reputational risk. A councilman cleared his throat and took a polite step back. Linda tried a laugh that landed like broken glass. There must be some misunderstanding. Samuel simply rested the documents on the podium and met her eyes unblinking. I stepped forward, the dress bright enough to dare the sun to look away. Kyle's grip squeaked on the scissors. He turned to me, color draining. Climax tightened around us like a drumhead. Kyle stammers, "You're joking, right, Maddie?" "No, but you can start packing like you told me to." For a heartbeat, the entire stage seemed to tilt. Then sound rushed back. Gasps, a dropped glass, the stutter of shutters. Clara's angle widened to catch donors slipping off the banner, buckling at its corners. My parents stranded in the center of their own performance with nowhere to exit gracefully. Samuel closed the briefcase. I felt the tide change, a current reversing under my feet, sure and cold and irreversible. Clara's video uploads within the hour. Maddie's phone vibrates nonstop with message alerts. I hadn't just taken back what was mine, I'd given it to the people who'd value it most. I woke from a dream of the veranda, Granny leaning on the rail while the sea combed wind through her hair, that small nod of approval she used when I'd finally understood a lesson. The image stayed with me as sunlight poured down the steps of Town Hall as I pushed open the conference room door and found neat rows of chairs, a small podium, and the low murmur of local press already setting up. The buzz from last week's spectacle hadn't faded. It had condensed into attention. Samuel stood by the window reviewing a packet with tabs color-coded like a battle plan. Evelyn squeezed my hand with a tremble she didn't bother to hide. I felt lighter and steadier at once, as if the building itself were lending me its columns. We began on time. I kept it simple. I said the name Seaview Villas and then changed it. I told them the property would become a student residency for architecture majors paired with a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name for students who could prove talent and need. Rooms that would have hosted donor weekends would hold models and sketches. The lawn would anchor community workshops. The shoreline would be monitored, studied, respected. A place built for show would be used for learning. Hands rose, microphones tilted. I answered questions about funding income from short-term educational programs, grants, a modest endowment begun with what remained after legal fees. I spoke about Granny's belief that design is public service when it's done right. Clara was there listening more than probing, letting the story breathe. Through the glass gulls traced easy arcs like punctuation. A messenger slipped Samuel a manila envelope mid-briefing. He glanced inside, then passed it to me, an offer drafted by Brian's attorney to restore familial harmony in exchange for equity and silence. The language was buttery and hard at once. I set it aside. No comment on that, I told the room. Our path is already chosen. Samuel crossed to the town clerk's desk with the efficiency of a man finishing a long race. Papers, stamped copies, notarized, the official ownership statement filed. When he returned, his smile was small and real. The climax came not as a shout, but as a vibration. Phones thudded against the tabletop in chorus as a press release from 3 different outlets hit. Kyle suspended from his bank pending investigation into misuse of position. Brian facing civil restitution tied to unauthorized transfers from a joint account. Linda resigning from 2 local boards to focus on family matters. The reporters looked at me as if the weather had shifted. I stood there and kept breathing. Afterward, the hallway filled with thank yous and handshakes. Evelyn cried openly when I asked her to serve on the scholarship board, laughing through it. Only if I get to veto ugly landscaping. We posed for a single photo. No champagne, just sunlight like a benediction. By evening, Clara's video ticked to 1 million views, a number I didn't know what to feel about except that it meant witnesses. Back at the cottage, I sat at the little desk where the light slides across the wood like a tide. The inbox pulsed. Grants volunteers students asking when applications would open. One subject line halted me a name I recognized from a journal I'd read in studio. I clicked heartbeat, suddenly audible in my ears. Maddie opens an email from an international architecture conference. We'd like you to speak about community-focused design. Justice had come not with a roar, but with the quiet certainty of a tide reclaiming its shore. The betrayal that once hollowed the summer had been answered with proof resolve and the public fall of those who thought themselves untouchable. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. In the end, it wasn't just about taking back what was stolen, it was about placing it where it could grow untainted. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.